This is open for citizens to be heard on any issue or concern. If you'd like to speak on a specific item on the agenda, please wait until the citizen comment period for that item. So again, we're going to have citizen comment for the individual items on the agenda. This is kind of a general citizen comments part of the meeting. So for all citizen comments, please fill out a speaker card and hand that to staff. We have those available up here at the table. Thank you, Amy. I feel like we're on an airplane. And come up to the microphone. So fill out a speaker card, hand that to staff. Come up to the microphone and state your name and address and limit your comments to 2 minutes. Any comments outside of the agenda items? All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and move to minutes. Consideration of approval of the July 3rd, 2025 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the minutes.
Motion for approval made by Board Member Smith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Scales. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, anyone opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Next, we'll move to staff announcements, I think.
Yes, the only announcement I have is that, just a friendly reminder, you're required to do your 4 hours of training within the year, and we are looking into options for that. So we'll be getting back with you shortly on this. Okay?
Thank you. So item number 2 is a variance request to allow a portion of a fence serving a non-residential use to be constructed without masonry columns for the property located at 1005 Marylinger Court. Staff.
Thank you. The subject property is located at 1005 Marylinger Court and is zoned Regional Commerce 4. The property currently has one existing principal building and is located 165 feet from the front lot line, and the owner is proposing a gym facility behind the existing building. This property received approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals, or BZA, in September 2023 for the proposed principal building to be located 225 feet from the front lot line, and then they received approval from the BZA in April 2025 to allow a 7-foot fence in the front yard area. Fences serving non-residential uses are required by the zoning ordinance to have masonry columns every 50 feet or less, so the applicant then submitted a permit for the masonry columns every 50 feet for the entirety of the fence line. The permit received a comment from the Water and Sewer Department that no masonry columns would be allowed within 5 feet of the sanitary sewer easement located on the west side of the property, and that only wooden posts would be allowed within that easement area. Staff was also informed by the engineering department that masonry columns are not typically permitted within a public utility easement, such as the utility and drainage easement that runs along the southeast or rear property line. For these reasons, the applicant is requesting a variance to allow the fence to be constructed without masonry columns for the portions of the fence that are within the sanitary sewer easement and the utility and drainage easement. I'll now go into staff analysis of the 3 criteria. Criteria 1, where by reason of the exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under this ordinance. The orientation of this lot with the surrounding neighbors and the easements existing on the lot make this property unique, with the existing building being located far from the front lot line due to the uniquely narrow front end of the lot. The existing building is facing the rear and side of most of its neighboring properties. In order to have privacy from the rear and sides of neighboring properties that most other properties are able to have, this property received a variance for a fence along the side and rear lot lines. In order to construct this fence for a non-residential use, masonry columns every 50 feet are required. With the sanitary sewer easement and the utility and drainage easement along the south and southeast lot lines, the applicant cannot construct the privacy fence along these property lines and comply with the requirement to construct masonry columns every 50 feet. Staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria 2, the strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties for or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. If the applicant were to comply with the requirement to have masonry columns every 50 feet, the fence would need to be constructed at least 5 feet outside the easements. This would result in the loss of usable space on the lot. Considering that fences are permitted to be and often are constructed on property lines, it is a peculiar practical difficulty to create unusable space on the lot to locate the fence outside the easements. Staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria 3, Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this portion of the fence without masonry columns is not a detriment to the public good and meets the intent of the zoning ordinance. Given the unique shape and the recessed location of the existing and proposed buildings, the fence would be minimally visible. The majority of the fence would be screened by trees, and the majority of the back of the lot is not visible from the street due to the slope of the lot. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to have the masonry columns every 50 feet where there are not sanitary, sewer, and utility and drainage easements on the lot in order to comply with the zoning ordinance as much as possible. This shows that the applicant is making effort to meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is met. Recommended motion. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to approve the variance request to allow a portion of a fence serving a non-residential use to be constructed without masonry columns for the property located at 1005 Mary Linger Court because the criteria for granting a variance have been met. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? If you could step forward for us and state your name for the record.
Yes, Andy Dennis.
You have any additional comments to add beyond what staff presented?
No, the only other request would be to eliminate the requirement for the columns altogether, just for the sake of the fence. It looked kind of odd with only a third of it, but other than that, no.
Okay, thank you.
You may stay here, go sit down.
If you want to take a seat there, if we have questions, we may have a couple for you, but otherwise, if you can take a seat for us, thank you. All right, next we will open the public comment period. Are there any citizen comments for this item? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment? Motion made by Board Member Fleischauer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? All right, public comments closed. Any questions from the board of the staff or the applicant? If not, I'm ready to entertain a motion when you guys are ready.
I move to approve the variance request to allow a portion of a fence serving as a non-residential use to be constructed without masonry columns for the property located at 1005 Merlinger Court because the criteria for granting a variance have been met.
A motion for approval made by Board Member Scales. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Board Member Beams. Let's go one by one on the vote. Board Member Beams.
I approve.
Board Member Scales.
Approve.
Board Member Langley, I approve. Board Member Smith.
Approve.
And Board Member Fleischauer. All right, this variance request is approved. So next is item number 3. It's going to be a variance request to allow 108 parking spaces within the Acton Street frontage area for a principal building for the property located at 926 Columbia Avenue. Staff.
Thank you. This 5.7-acre property located at 926 Columbia Avenue is zoned CC Central Commercial District and is within the CAO 1 Columbia Avenue overlay. The property is currently vacant and the applicant is proposing development with a mix of commercial and residential uses on the site. The property is surrounded on all 4 sides by Columbia Avenue, Plaza Street, Acton Street, and Folk Street. The only permitted frontage type in the Columbia Avenue overlay is urban frontage, so this development must have urban frontage along all 4 sides of the property to front each street. Urban frontage requires parking to be located behind the building. The proposed layout for the development of this site complies with the urban frontage zoning ordinance requirements along Folk Street, Columbia Avenue, and Plaza Street. However, the proposed hotel does not comply with the urban frontage requirements along Acton Street. The applicant is proposing 108 parking spaces within the urban frontage area of the hotel facing Acton Street. I'll now just read through the justification for each criteria, so please let me know if you'd like me to repeat one of the criteria. Criteria 1. While it is unique that the property has frontage on all 4 sides, and there is some grade change on the lot, staff does not see how these factors prevent development as required under the frontage standards along Acton Street. Neither of these factors seem to prevent the hotel building from being located closer to Acton Street and having the parking located behind. The grade change is located along the south side of the lot, along Folk Street, and from the existing conditions exhibit, it seems that the slopes on the lot are flattest along Acton Street and Plaza Street. The topography of the lot seems conducive to development closer to Acton Street. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 2. Staff finds that the strict application of the zoning ordinance would not result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. The variance request is unique to the applicant's proposed plan and not generally to all potential designs of the site. It appears to staff that the applicant could design a plan for the site that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. It is the expectation of the city that an applicant designs their site in a way that meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance and not use the variance process to avoid inconvenience or financial hardship. Staff finds that the proposed plan introduces a self-imposed hardship, one that could likely be resolved by redesigning to meet the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 3. The design of this site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance introduced the requirements of frontage starting with the 2019 zoning ordinance update as a direct response to the adoption of Envision Franklin in 2017. Two of the core guiding principles are exceptional design and vibrant neighborhoods. One characteristic of exceptional design, as outlined in Envision Franklin, is that parking should be secondary to the building and its relationship to the street, and that views from the street should not be of parking lots. One characteristic of vibrant neighborhoods, as outlined in Envision Franklin, includes pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods that make walking and biking more enjoyable along streets. The intent of the zoning ordinance is to reinforce the principles of Envision Franklin by keeping parking to the side or behind principal buildings. The zoning ordinance also addresses appropriate means of transitioning between new development and established areas expected to remain. Chapter 8, Transitional Features, provides appropriate ways to achieve compatibility, and placing parking between new and existing uses is not one of the means listed. This site is not designed in a way that meets the intent of the ordinance from Acton Street. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Recommended motion. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to disapprove the variance request to allow 108 parking spaces within the Acton Street frontage area for a principal building for the property located at 926 Columbia Avenue because the criteria for granting a variance have not been met. Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Do we have speaker cards for this item? May go ahead and grab those if you've got them, and then that way we'll be prepared. If the applicant's present, if you want to go ahead and step forward for us and state your name for the record, please.
Good evening. I'm Jimmy Granberry, Chairman and CEO of H.G. Hill Realty Company. We've been in business 130 years, and we're very excited about this project. We have a great team put together. Our development partners are Dorados, who will develop our hotel, Hari and Smith, who's been in business for 71 years. They'll be our residential partner. They've been building in Franklin for over 50 years. Our design team consists of Barge Civil Design out of Nashville. They've been around for a long time. Barge is a very known name and commodity in the development business. And then 906 Partners, Mike Hathaway, is our architect for the hotel, the residential and our commercial buildings across the front. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike now. He'll talk about the design aspects and talk about the three criteria that the staff just talked about, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions after that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Hathaway, 906 Studio Architects. Thank you guys for allowing me to speak. We have heard the criteria and understand the expectations of the city. We believe this is a unique situation. We are trying to create a wonderful new development that ties into all the city expectations for this site. Part of that is how we're connecting back down Columbia Avenue to the downtown and extending that. So we have fronted Columbia Avenue and are excited about how we're going to create a wonderful space there. And as was stated earlier, we've also fronted Folks Avenue and Plaza Street in order to create those edges. Where we're having issues is because we're trying to be respectful of the Natchez Street district right behind us and how we create a compatible use for that area. If we front the hotel along Acton Street, we're concerned that we're going to create activity there that's going to be disruptive to that very quiet, beautiful neighborhood behind us. So as we're looking at the adjacencies across the street to the east on Columbia Avenue, a lot of those uses like the new AutoZone and the new bank that's over there, they front Columbia. And because it's a shorter block where that street behind them is, it separates that larger block into two smaller blocks, there's parking behind that, just like what we're asking of the Acton Street side. There's parking behind that that also faces residential. So in some cases, they put up a fence, a brick wall there to separate, and that was the way they've created that barrier. We're asking similar thing. We want to put a street down the center of the property that acts as a connector between Plaza Street and Folks to give not only a way to cross across our property in the back, but also a chance to alleviate some of the traffic issues that are out there so people can have another route to get around. So when we do that, the idea was we're breaking this up into the same depth of property that you see across on the east side. That allows us to internally front that street that we've created. So the hotel, we're proposing to front that internal street, and all the traffic that would be busy there for the hotel would be fronting that street, and all the activity would be internal to this site. And we create this really innovative, invigorated, mixed-use facility. Then on the rear, the parking would then be a buffer to that existing residential in the back. So in doing that separation, we feel like we've created a buffer between the Natchez homes that are there. You know, if you know the history of that site, that used to be more or less a service alley. So Acton Street really has always acted as an alleyway back there. We're trying to make sure that it's protected from the residential. We want to put a fence in the back, a wall in the back along Acton so we can give them a barrier. And then we want the residential to really be its own separate, smaller community where there's not a lot of traffic on Acton that's created by our development. So we would ask that you give us the opportunity to do that and create a beautiful development that fronts 3 major roads, and then in that secondary road of Acton that we're buffering off of that with our building so it is compatible to the residential. Definitely happy to answer any questions that you guys have, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I'll mention too, we've got your full site plan and packet in front of us, so we all have kind of digital access to that. So if questions come up, we can reference that. It may not be behind us necessarily on the screen.
Sure, that's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, so next we will open the public comment. Can't tell if these are for or against, so let's go with maybe against first. I'll kind of call that out. I'll tell you what, we'll just start and just work from the list. I've got 3 here. So Mr. Julian Bibb, if you're present, if you could step forward for us and add your comments.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Julian Bibb at 918 Fair Street, Franklin, and I'm here in support of the variance. I think this property is unique in all of development, having 4 frontage streets, and that's a rare thing, and I think that gives you discretion under the zoning ordinance to make the change that's requested by the developer. The developer is creating a unique commercial, retail, hotel, and residential neighborhood that fits in with the other surrounding properties on Columbia Avenue and down the street. And then they're trying to be extremely respectful of the historic neighborhood behind them by moving the hotel more toward the center of this property. Acton, as we all know, is a very narrow street, and it fronts a historic neighborhood, and they're trying to make sure that the hotel is respectful of that neighborhood. For that reason, I am in total support of the variance request. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. So next I have Mr. Scott Black.
Hi, good evening. My name is Scott Black. I live at 117 Bromley Park Lane. I'm also currently serving as the chairman of the board for the Franklin Housing Authority, which is the property on the other side of Acton Street. So I want to come out and speak in support of the design as I see it today on the drawings. I agree with everything that Mike said as far as the buffer zone there. But I also would say as a developer and an architect, I've dealt with a situation like this. You listed extraordinary situation in the site plan, and it seems to allude to narrowness, but in this site, it's extra wide. And dealing with that as a developer, if you were to take the buildings and put them all the way to the curb on both sides, you would create a vast parking lot in the middle that I don't think from a design standpoint would be aesthetically pleasing and would not be a great attribute to an overall design. But what they have drawn, I think, is a complement for this site and works really well. And so, and I will say as a member of the board for the Housing Authority, we feel like the design is appropriate for being across the street from our community. So, and with that, I say that we support this design as drawn.
Okay, thanks for your comments. I next have Mr. Steve Bacon.
Steve Bacon at 201 Polk Place in Franklin. I'm the developer of Harpeth Square along with two others, and I support this variance. To Scott's point, when I was looking at the site plan, how Mike drew it out, is that it sort of breaks that massive parking up by putting that hotel in the middle. And to me, you sort of meet the urban frontage by having that road in the middle by putting the hotel close to that road. So I respectfully disagree with staff on their comments on that. And I do think, again, to Scott's comments, about the transition back to Acton is a lot better than putting the hotel in the back. So all these points to me is that I am hoping you would vote for it. I think it's a great use for that Columbia corridor that we're seeing develop. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional citizen comments? Okay, seeing none. Oh. If you can, just state your name for the record for us.
My name's Bob Bass, 107 Everbright. Just wanted to say I love the plan that they've laid out. The Acton Street situation, you're 60 feet face-to-face from the existing houses to the new building. You have very narrow backyards and a very narrow right-of-way. And so with a 53-foot building, 60 feet away, it's going to be 9 o'clock in the morning before the sun ever touches these houses that we're talking about. I love the road they put through. I live on Columbia, off Columbia. I just sat 2.5 minutes at 7 o'clock to pull out tonight to come to this meeting. The traffic-wise, the way they have laid this out to access from the north and the south, you're going to flow onto this side tremendously better than having driveways coming in. So just in general, I love the layout of what they're doing.
Thank you. All right, any additional citizen comments? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment? Motion made by Board Member Fleischauer. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Board Member Beams. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, anyone opposed? All right, public comment is closed. Questions from the board of staff or the applicant? I know I have one. Board Member Smith may have one as well, so I'll let you go ahead.
Yes, if I could ask a question of the speaker from the Franklin Housing Authority. So the housing that is on Short Court
Yes,
that
ma'am.
backs onto Acton,
Yes, ma'am.
does Franklin Housing Authority own all of those buildings that back onto Acton?
Yes, ma'am. On the drawing, all the purple, we own all the purple.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I think my question, I'd asked staff earlier, just to kind of prep them instead of throwing them under the bus. I have looked at the site, looked at Acton Street. It's a very narrow street. I can remember when may not have been I think probably when I was really young, it may have still been the H.G. Hill grocery store. But narrow street there, is that a one-way street currently with on-street parking?
It's a two-way street on Acton from Plaza down south, and there is not currently marketed parking along Acton Street.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from board members? Got a lot to absorb here, so I want to make sure we have facts addressed.
Maybe a few comments and then one question. I agree that the design is in line with what we want to do in Franklin, and I think it's a very good problem solved of putting the hotel where you put the hotel. I guess if I think about this logically, if there was only a hotel going on this site, where would you put the parking? Because it would have to be in the back, but what do you consider the back or front? So the solution, I think, is really good. My question is about the road that's being introduced. Is this going to be considered a public road?
We don't know that yet. The site plan has not been submitted. It would likely need the engineering department to review it and potentially a traffic study involved to see if that curb cut would be appropriate at that location, whether it could be designated as a public right-of-way, whether there would need to be a drive aisle. There's lots of things to consider, and we just haven't done that yet because the site plan hasn't been submitted.
Okay, thank you.
If the applicant could help us with that question, if you've addressed that with engineering or,
At this point, the intention would be private. Oh, sorry. So the intention would be to be a private road at this point, but as I said, we haven't submitted site plan or anything like that, and there's potential it could be requested to be public, but at this point, it's considered, intended to be a private road.
Please don't go.
No, I mean, I will stay.
So the delivery vehicles to support the hotel, where are they going to go?
They
Would
would
they
go-
go off of Acton? Would they go off the new proposed private road? Where would they go?
You know, I think the intention would be they would come off the private road and then, or, yeah, the new private road and go around the backside of it to access it. You know, I think the idea is that the access to Acton would be very minimal. That most of the activity would be coming off of Plaza or Folk Street.
Okay,
And we've, you know that currently there's a lot of accesses onto, from Columbia Pike onto the property. Those will all be taken away. We're going to have that as a full straight without any kind of access property line there.
okay, I've got one more question
Sure.
about what it will look like on the Acton side. You said you're going to put a wall up, or is there going to be, I noticed in some of the illustrations there would be trees, but is there any additional screening?
You know, we don't have the details yet, as of yet, to do that, but the intent would be to screen it. You know, our idea is that we would use probably a brick wall, maybe a 6-foot tall brick wall, and then add additional landscaping screening. But we'd want to make it, obviously, for our use, and as well as the neighborhood, we'd want to make that a much, very attractive edge to that property.
Yeah, I would just think if I had a nice backyard on Short Court, I would want to have privacy. And
Sure.
that-
And there's a substantial, if you've been there, there's a substantial hedge that
Yes.
is on the backside. And
Yes,
probably
there is.
shielding what was the H.C. Hill, you know, back of the
Yes.
shopping center grocery store at one time. So we obviously wouldn't be promoting to take that down.
Okay, thank you.
I think Board Member Beams, I didn't hear the answer to this. I think you asked a good question probably of staff of just perspective on Four Corners, and I guess I'm thinking larger just application. Board of Zoning Appeals, we've had a couple different requests come. I'd say we're kind of testing the zoning ordinance in different areas where it's a unique situation. Do you guys have any kind of response back to Board Member Beams' question on just, I think your question was about maybe that backside, how else they might, how staff would kind of want them to address the parking other than, what was your question, Board Member Beams? I don't feel like that was answered.
Well, that was just a comment, because I was thinking of it in a design solution. If you just plop one building on there, the parking is still going to be, yeah.
I think I'll probably have more on discussion when we get to that point, just
Okay.
surrounding that, but probably less facts-based. Any additional kind of questions for the applicant before we move to a motion? All right, I'm ready to entertain a motion. We'll have plenty of time for discussion once we get that on the floor. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the variance requested to allow 108 parking spaces within the Acton Street frontage area for a principal building for the property located at 926 Columbia Avenue because, in my opinion, the criteria for granting the variance has been met, and I like the design.
Okay. Motion for approval made by Board Member Fleischauer. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Board Member Beams. Discussion.
I like the design, I like the idea. I like the idea of the hedge or Mike doing something back there similar to what is already there, and I think it's going to be much more beautiful than what they've ever had thus far in years and years. And like he said, parking's going to go in the back. If the hotel was moved up towards Columbia Avenue, if there wasn't frontage on all the other three sides, and we have frontage on all the other three sides. I think he's done everything he can possibly do with this site.
I think I would echo that. And additionally, you know, we're looking at the three criteria, so that's what staff is viewing kind of through their lens. Went through that analysis. The challenge I have, and that's why I asked the question about Acton Street, very narrow street, definitely unique condition. Acton Street doesn't continue, I guess that's west. No, that's south. I think the way I'm looking at the plans, it doesn't continue south. It's a unique situation. I'm also looking at, you know, if this were presented on a different lot, I might think differently about that. But just given the street context of Acton, I think it is unique. You know, going back to the three criteria, that's kind of where I always look. The very first one, so that's usually the hardest hurdle for us to climb as board members. We're about reasonable, staff read this, but, you know, we're looking at narrowness, shallowness, shape of a specific piece of property, or topography, extraordinary and exceptional conditions or situations. I feel like this request meets that. I mean, given Acton Street, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, but looked at Acton Street. It's pretty narrow back there. Citizen made the comment just about the height and kind of the shadow piece of that. I don't know that that's the perfect situation for this. In general, I think, you know, zoning, I get the reason behind the requirement there, but I feel like this is a unique situation where we definitely meet that first criteria, or the applicant does anyway. Any additional discussion?
I would echo your comments about criteria one. I mean, thank you. Not necessarily in a traditional read of the first criteria, we do have an exceptional circumstance. And again, that four sides does make this very unique. In terms of the second, I do think that a strict application disregards the effort they've put in with this design to try to accommodate this really large space, and try to be very sensitive to, again, the neighborhood in the back and also the structure of this piece of property. So I do think criteria 1 and 2 are met. And in terms of the third, I do think the third is met too, because in my opinion, I don't think it does not meet that criteria. So I would be in favor of the request.
I echo, and one of the things that when I looked at this application, and my biggest concern was the neighborhood on Acton. I mean, this is everything to me, is what's the impact of the neighborhood on Acton? Because those houses' backyards face the street, there's no access onto Acton from those backyards. There's no sidewalk. It's not like the neighborhood fronts those streets on Acton. The houses do not front Acton. So I think this is a unique circumstance that is not designed with the zoning ordinance. So I do think that the exception is allowed on that. I also think that it's interesting to consider the new road, whether it's private or public. The hotel will face this road.
Right.
And so therefore the parking will be behind the hotel that faces the road. It's just not the road that exists today. So it's kind of like, well, which road should it face? If it's got one new road and we got an old road that's very narrow and doesn't have sidewalks and is really not in the traditional neighborhood as designed by the zoning ordinance. So I do think the criteria have been met to approve the ordinance, the variance.
I think that's an accurate assessment right
Okay.
there.
Any more discussion? Don't want to cut anybody off. Okay, so we have a motion for approval and a second. Let's go one by one on the vote. Board Member Beams.
Approve.
Board Member Scales.
Approve.
Board Member Langley, approved. Board Member Smith.
Approve.
And Board Member Fleischauer.
Approved.
right, this item is approved. I think that is our last official item. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Motion made by Board Member Smith, second by Board Member Flushauer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Y'all have a great night.
Absolutely.